Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
You know, Wobbles, I'm kind of mad at you.
And as a reasonable man, I'm willing to do whatever's necessary to find a peaceful solution to these problems.
All right, welcome viewers and listeners and viewers to the Punching Up podcast, where two long-standing friends and movie lovers take a bit of a swing at movies that are in the canon. That is classic movies, cult classic movies, and just incredibly popular, beloved movies. And the subject, firstly, hello, my name is Adam Nightingale, and you are?
Damian.
Good. Now, the subject for this week's Punching Up podcast is, what is it, Damian?
Cat Ballou.
Cat Ballou. Now, Cat Ballou is an odd subject for this podcast, because I wouldn't necessarily say, Damian, before we get into it, that it's necessarily perceived as a classic. It's definitely the kind of odd one out in all the movies that we've selected so far, isn't it? Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. More of a cult classic.
Yeah, or just popular, like, bank holiday, Monday, Sunday afternoon viewing. But it is a very, very popular film. And I'll explain what we're going to have a pop at in a minute, but it's not the film per se. So before we do that, Damian, could you give a synopsis of Cat Ballou?
So Jane Fonda plays Catherine Ballou, an aspiring school teacher who returns to her father's ranch in Wyoming in the early 1890s to find that he's in trouble with some dodgy locals who want his land. He's threatened by Tim Strawn, played by Lee Marvin, the sinister, noseless Tim Strawn. And so Cat enlists the help of her father's farmhand, a couple of petty crooks, a famous gunfighter, Kid Shalene, also played by Lee Marvin, who turns out to be a useless drunk, and then comedic shenanigans ensue. The film is punctuated throughout with verses of the song, The Ballad of Cat Ballou, sung brilliantly and performed brilliantly by Nat King Cole and Stubby Kaye, who plays a kind of Greek chorus for the film. And the film was made in 1965. There you go.
That's fantastic. That's better than what I would have done. The making of the film. The film was originally based on a novel that wasn't a comedy. The Ballad of Cat Ballou, and it was a straight up, like, female-led revenge western. The rights were bought by Columbia. The author, let me consult my notes, Roy Chancellor, is also famous for writing the book that the Nicholas Ray, Joan Crawford starring western Johnny Guitar was based on. And it was initially, conceived as a straight-up revenge western. But then at some point, I'm not sure when, they decided they were going to make it a comedy. They were going to make it a musical comedy. And then Columbia Pictures had a bit of a catastrophe with westerns, courtesy of my favorite director, who is no longer with us, Sam Peckinpah, who made Major Dundee, which was an absolute nightmare to shoot. There was massive falling out between Peckinpah and the studio. It was reshot. It was expensive. It lost a load of money. So they scaled down the amount of money they were going to pump into westerns. And so they're going to put out this, like, modestly budgeted western. They try and get some big names. So Kirk Douglas was the first choice for Kid Shalene. He didn't want to do it. They wanted to get Anne Margaret, who I'm assuming was, like, quite hot off the tails of Bye Bye Birdie at that point. She didn't do it. I think she wanted to do it. I'm not sure why she didn't get the job. At some point, Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis were involved. And then they settle on up-and-coming starlet, daughter of Henry Fonda, Jane Fonda, who's largely an untested actress at this point and is better known for being incredibly pretty and being the daughter of, not the daughter of Peter Fonda, that'd be weird, the daughter of Henry Fonda, and the wife of Roger Vadim, the sort of French director who'd gone to direct her in Barbarella. They settle on Lee Marvin because Lee Marvin, who has had this incredible 10-year career as being one of the best supporting heavies and then lead heavies in movies, but not necessarily a household name, had done a TV series at his agent's insistence called M Squad, and that had given him, like, household fame status and a bit of marquee value. And so they cast him and they countercast him as a comedy drunk and as Damian pointed out, his evil brother with a tin nose, and he just goes for it. I think it's fair to say he is almost fired for overacting by the producer, and the director Elliot Silverstein basically like says if he goes, I go, and then the film comes out with Lee Marvin's performance front and center of it, and the film makes a colossal fortune. Its budget was I can't remember what its budget was, but it made like 20 million in America, which was an enormous, in adjusted dollars, that's an enormous hit. And then Lee Marvin goes on to cause a surprise upset at the Oscars, beating the likes of Rod Steiger and Laurence Olivier to win his first and only Oscar. Just a couple of things, because we're not really going to talk about the movie that much. Just a couple of interesting sort of little facts, dark facts about it. It was Nat King Cole's last movie. So Nat King Cole died of cancer. The author died the year the film came out, and one of the character actors, J.C. Flippin, lost his leg shortly after. So I think there's a case to be made that there's a curse of Cat Ballou. We might be the first to sort of highlight the curse of Cat Ballou, and I think it definitely exhibited some kind of cursed effect on many of Lee Marvin's performances after he won his Oscar, and so the subject, the reason that we're punching up today, is we're having a pot at Lee Marvin's outrageously bad acting that was rewarded with an Academy Award. And I have to put the caveat in that Lee Marvin is one of my 3 favorite actors.
Wow, that was really exciting. I bet you're a big Lee Marvin fan, aren't you? Yeah, me too. I love that guy.
The other 2 being Robert Mitchum and Lee Van Cleef, and it shames me to watch him in this film because I love him so much. So can I just ask you, firstly, Damian, because you'd never seen Cat Ballou before, I've seen it too many times. What did you think of the film itself? We'll talk about Marvin in a minute. What do you think of the film? What are your thoughts on the film?
It's quite pedestrian. It doesn't sort of have anything spectacular about it. The highlights of the film were Jane Fonda, although I don't think she had a lot to play with. She was ultimately the straight person with lots of sort of clowning going on and buffoonery around her. And I did hear that she was quite pissed off with Lee Marvin, that she wanted to have it a little bit more of a serious film. I think she wanted to be a serious actor. And the other part that I really enjoyed was the musical numbers.
Progress for those listeners who listen to our Young Frankenstein episode. This is I don't know what they call this in psychological terms, but this is definitely a step forward. Breakthrough, yeah.
Nat King Cole and Stubby Kaye are brilliant. They punctuate the film really nicely and re-energize it. I suppose it was just a bit boring, really. And Lee Marvin is just, I hated Lee Marvin in it, and I hated John Marley in it. I hated John Marley more than I hated Lee Marvin, to be honest with you.
Which one? Remind me, which one was John Marley?
John Marley is
because you got like three young supports.
And he's not any of those. Yeah. John Marley is her dad, Frankie Ballou. Who went on to play Jack Waltz in The Godfather, the movie producer who finds himself with a horse's head in his badge. And she was the greatest piece of ass in the world, and I've had him all over the world,
She was the greatest piece of ass I've ever had, and I've had him all over the world.
So another bad misquote that I'll fix in the edit. I didn't buy anything that he was doing. I just found him it felt like he was just saying the words. And I thought, and I don't think I've seen him in anything else apart from The Godfather. And he's great as Jack Waltz in The Godfather. Yeah. It works brilliantly. But
and Lee Marvin's great in everything else he does that's not a comedy, which we can talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Paint Your Wagon or any of the other sort of
No,
other
please
buffooneries. So yeah, all in all, Cat Ballou, aka Scat Ballou, aka Shat Ballou. Yeah, not my favorite film. And you said you've seen it too many times. I'm probably never going to see it again.
Well, I saw it. I mean, the reason I saw it too many times was because my niece. I watched it out of curiosity, like I don't know, maybe last year, and my niece was watching it with me, and so I just enjoyed watching it with my niece because my mission is to get her into westerns, and she's 7, and she enjoys them, and she really enjoyed Cat Ballou, and she enjoyed the horrible Benny Hill moment where they.
I was going to say, yeah, horrible.
Yeah, and so she enjoyed all of that sort of stuff, and she enjoyed him. Yeah, I think the film's ordinary. It's likable. I mean, I watched it, in my rewatch. I kind of thought it's mildly amusing. It's got some really interesting stuff that you have to explain or not explain to a 7-year-old, because one of the characters is basically a sex pest, isn't he? And he's constantly sort of climbing into Catherine Ballou's like bedroom, berth, and just basically trying to sort of get in her drawers, and. Yeah, and that was an interesting conversation with the 7-year-old, just trying to talk around that, for a family film. Things, so things were different in the 60s, as they say, and yeah, I think a lot of the leads are likable. They're a bit anonymous, and interestingly, none of them really went on to stardom. I actually like Jane Fonda. I think she gives the best performance in the film, and yeah. There's, you can see a graduation from like naive, schoolgirl to kind of outlaw, enthusiastic outlaw. I like what do you think of the English guy? The English villain, the English. It's a broad performance, but I really liked it. The one that's in the bath, constantly.
Oh yeah. I mean, like in Young Frankenstein, we were talking about, like he's straight out of Carry On films.
Yeah, or like Bedknobs and Broomsticks. It feels like is it David Tomlinson? He feels like the sort of the dad in Mary Poppins, or David Tomlinson in Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
I think all his scenes were directed terribly and not given any kind of comedic rhythm to them. There was so many bits where it just cut out, and he just thought you're just missing a trick here. Like, you could actually, he's not bad, but fix the whole thing in the edit, and the edit was just, I think it was a waste of time. Like I don't know, Elliot Silverstein, I don't really know too much if he's done what else. A Man Called Horse, didn't he, afterwards?
Yeah. So you can, and a film I remember from when I was a kid, a horror film called The Car, about a demon-possessed car, which is quite good fun. And you can see it's really weird. You can see him going to the other extreme, something like a man Called Horse, and dealing with another actor who is prone to overact sometimes, Richard Harris, and then sort of abandoning the family friendliness of Cat Ballou, almost as a form of aversion therapy, and making one of the most sadistic westerns of the 1970s, with Richard Harris getting hung up by his nips by evil claws swung around a teepee. So I feel like we're punching down, like roughing up Elliot Silverstein, because he's not Scorsese, he's not even Mel Brooks, really. And what I wrote in my notes when I was rewatching Cat Ballou was, and this is a reference to our Last But One podcast, looking at Lee Marvin's acting, I feel I owe Marty Feldman an apology.
Brilliant.
Yeah, because if you've seen that podcast, I've really kind of give Marty Feldman a hard time for his mugging and bugging, and Lee Marvin, there's just no restraint in his performance. There's not a top he doesn't go over, and he's just absolutely gurning, from top to bottom. Vocally, he's appalling. You've got that awful bit where he's trying to remember his name. He's going, happy birthday to you, happy birthday. And there's a bit where there's sort of, I can't even remember why, but he's interjected with, I'll drink to that, and then his sort of physical comedy when he's trying. There's a famous scene, and people love this film. This is why I want to punch at it. People absolutely love this film. Lee Marvin fans love this performance. And the whole physical comedy where he's trying to, it's a nice joke where he's drawing his gun. It's a nice line, rather, and he's trying to shoot a target on a barn, and he misses the barn. Somebody says, "You've done it. You've missed the barn." But it's just like kind of eye rolling. It's this sort of like physical lurches everywhere, and just the whole thing is one of the most indulged performances by what I would argue is a great actor. And it went on mercifully. I think there's a I want to make a comparison here between, the way certain rewarded and praised performances will destroy someone's acting to an extent. And so you get a pre-Shining Jack Nicholson, don't you? And a post-Shining Jack Nicholson. And a pre-Shining Jack Nicholson is 5 easy pieces. It's Chinatown, subtle. I mean, he still does his big Nicholson moments. The Passenger, Antonioni's The Passenger. Easy Rider, and then everything after The Shining, when Kubrick lets him go big, arguably slightly unbalances the movie in the second half, is different. Then he becomes jacked, doesn't he? And he's less an actor. He's still an actor. He still does brilliant stuff. And Al Pacino in Scarface. Al Pacino pre-Scarface is this subtle, quiet actor.
So quiet.
Yeah, and even in stuff like Dog Day Afternoon, where he's quite an extrovert character, he's a subtle actor. Not so after, and he's become a trope, hasn't he? The line between Scarface, Descent of a Woman, turns him into a completely different, very, very shouty, still brilliant, but very, very shouty actor. Doesn't quite happen with Lee Marvin, and we can talk a little bit about. I'm not going to talk a lot about Lee Marvin. We can talk about what he was like before and what he was like after. From this point on, he sort of he zigs and zags in his career, and he carries on doing to greater and greater effect, I think, the stuff that he did beforehand. These great, controlled, subtle, nasty, morally ambivalent character roles. But then he does Paint Your Wagon, and then he does this appalling movie with Roger Moore, where Roger Moore, you look at Roger Moore and you think, and it's one of the few times you can say I'm backing Roger Moore as the better actor in this scene, this sort of this movie, this adventure movie called Shout at the Devil, and he's and it's sort of infected his acting, and it's just the way the Academy can reward something so over the top and grotesque. So we can go in a lot of directions here, and I'll let you pick the path, Damian.
Yeah, before we do that, I was thinking about his performance in this and related to what we were talking about in Young Frankenstein, when you said Gene Wilder lets Marty Feldman basically do whatever he wants and go ham, which is basically what he does. I think that this director let Lee Marvin do exactly what he wants, and doesn't, like I said about the English actor, he doesn't know how to direct these scenes. And this is not, he's probably just a journeyman director and that, and so we're not, as you said, but I think this is why it doesn't work. The editing and the directing. I think you could have got a better performance. Well, actually, the script as well, because to be fair, when we got to the end, Megan said, he didn't even need to be in the film. Kid Shalene doesn't even need to be in the film. He's he does nothing. He doesn't help anybody. And actually, the big showdown, this is another great example of that. The big showdown between him and Tim Strawn is pathetic. Nothing happens. He goes into the room, sees him, and then he goes out. And it's I don't know if they just left that on the editing floor, that it was just so bad, or they didn't film it, or what. But I feel like a lot of it is just, you just go for it. We'll film it. Yep, that's fine. We'll put that in. And it just doesn't work compositionally, I don't think. Performance-wise and narratively-wise. They could have, as you said, that bit when he says, I want a drink, he's sat in the bar, isn't he? And the rest of them are trying to have a conversation what are we going to do? Are they trying to rob the train or something? Or they've just robbed the train, something like that. And they all seem to be in the same film, and he's in a totally different film. It's he's just saying, I want a drink, and nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. You're not, the way that the character is being brought into the film, it's just not, who cares? And the fact that the Academy and then the public lauded him with such, praise is just beyond me. But, people don't know what they don't know things, do they?
Turning into me.
Yeah. This is my first one. Yeah.
One of the things, one of the things that we agreed to do beforehand was that there's an interesting little kind of awards like for like comparison here, because often one of the criticisms about awards in general, especially acting awards, is you comparing apples with oranges. How can you compare different performances by different, if all of the actors are of a similar caliber. But a year before, Lee Marvin won a BAFTA his only BAFTA in a category that doesn't exist anymore, Best International Performance by a Leading Man, for a movie he did called The Killers. And I think that's one of his best performances.
It's a brilliant film, mate.
Yeah. You watched it. Do you want to talk a little bit about? Because I'm very, very familiar with The Killers. You watched it for the first time.
Yeah, you can add in. I love the tone of it. I love the.
Can you just explain what it is to people who don't know first?
Yeah. So Lee Marvin and Clu Gulaga play a couple of killers who break into a school and execute John Cassavetes, who's a school teacher at a blind school. Yeah. And then the movie goes on in flashback to tell you how we got to that point. And then skips forward as well, doesn't it? It's like they find out like what happened to John Cassavetes, and then they move forward with Lee Marvin and Clu Gulaga trying to find out why they've been sent to kill this guy, because they've been paid a lot of money and it seems odd, and some reason Lee Marvin wants to, he's got it in his bonnet that he wants to find out what happened. And yeah, you go on this really kind of like noir. We were talking before about like film noir versus hard boiled. What would you call that? A hard boiled or a?
I would call it both. I mean, it's stylistically not a noir because it's filmed. I mean, it was a made-for-TV movie that was released theatrically, so it was filmed in cinematic aspect ratio, and it was ultimately, I think, it was released theatrically in Europe, and then I don't think was screened in America because it was considered too violent, and considering it came out in '63, and also there were parallels with there's a sequence where someone gets shot from a roof by a sniper, and it came out in around about the same time as the Kennedy assassination, so there was all of that sort of all of that sort of static in the background kind of affected its chances on TV. And also, it, for its time, it is incredibly violent. They have this like shocking sequence that still shocks me, where they're interrogating Angie Dickinson, and then Clu Gulaga just turns around and punches her full on in the face, and then Lee Marvin tries to throw her out of a window, and it's still shocking today. I mean, on my Blu-ray, the Blu-ray I watched it on, it still has an 18 certificate, which I think is a little bit excessive, but it might be that sequence that gives it its 18 certificate, and it's quite bloody for a TV movie of the time. And
I had no idea that it was a TV movie, and it doesn't feel like a TV movie at all. It feels like a really well put together cinematic piece of film.
And also the big difference between that and directorially between that and Cat Ballou is it's directed by Don Siegel, who up to that point had got a reputation as being one of the best, tightest, kind of stripped back directors of sort of thrillers. And at that point he got Riot in Cell Block 11 and Invasion of the Body Snatchers under his belt. And he's going to go on to make Dirty Harry and Charlie Varick and Escape from Alcatraz. That's ahead of it, and he's great. Some great. I'm not a massive fan of the bits that Lee Marvin and Clu Gulaga aren't in. I think they sag a bit. I think Angie Dickinson's great. She's always great. She's a great foil for him. I think they made 3 movies together. She was one of his best sparring partners. Well, sparring's probably not the best choice of words considering she gets punched in the face, but best acting partners. But Marvin is amazing in it. And also add that it's based on the Ernest Hemingway story, The Killers, and Marvin's so controlled and tight. His interplay with Clu Gulaga is brilliant, and that comes straight out of the novel. Not the novel, the short story, because the sort of it's a short story, and it's just basically 2 killers wait to kill a guy, intimidating people in a diner. So they've expanded the story a lot, and the sort of spice of the story is just 2 killers, and also the kind of ambiguity, because what triggers the investigation is killers investigating their own assassination, isn't it? And he makes out that it's the money, but it's not. It's something a bit more existential. It's like, I've never seen anyone not run and just accept their fate, and I want to know. Yeah. And so there's a kind of, the moment he does that, the film noir elements, definitely hardball. The film noir elements that kick in are the fatalism. So the moment he makes that decision, without spoiling everything, everyone is doomed, in the movie. And also you've got the femme fatale, one of the great sort of, one of the great colour cinema femme fatales in Angie Dickinson, and he's just controlled, isn't he? He's so tight. He's droll. He looks amazing, I think, you know, and it's almost like that becomes his like default look, his grey suit, you know, and his white hair, and he's so, you know, it's almost like the two performances are two completely different actors who look a bit similar, you know, and I keep saying that he's controlled, he's tight, his voice is very modulated, he's very I love Lee Marvin's sarcasm, and he's got this lovely, like, and he doesn't shout until one point in the film where he screams in like Angie Dickinson's face, and then there's this explosion of violence that's in him all the time, and then all the physical gurning, all the horrible physical overacting. You see what a brilliant physical performer he is and can be in The Killers, because there's a scene where he's wounded and he's just staggering around somewhere, like falling down, getting up, trying to sort of execute a task. And I think the only person that compare with him in terms of like graceful, brilliant, balletic dying scenes is James Cagney, who was an actual dancer. So if you watch his sort of Warner Brothers gangster movies, he always has a, you know, he always has a death where he, you know, in the Roaring Twenties, there's a bit where he's shot and he like staggers up the steps of this building and then staggers down and then falls. And Lee Marvin matches him, you know, in terms of his physicality and his gracefulness. And if you watch The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, there's no spoiler to say that he dies in that, because he's Liberty Valance, and it's called The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. When he's eventually shot in that film, the way he falls over and dies is comparably graceful. You know, it's almost like he defies gravity and kind of low. It's almost like kind of, yeah, so just lowers himself to the ground. Has this way of falling over that's kind of beautiful to watch, and that's the Lee Marvin I love, and that's the Lee Marvin that should have been rewarded with Oscars, like way before he gets one in 1966. You know, he should have had a supporting actor Oscar for something like The Big Heat, or maybe The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance as one of his heavies. But why do you think he took the role? Why do you think he took the role in the first place?
Well, I mean, it's an opportunity, isn't it, to do something different as an actor?
Yeah.
I think that had the script been tighter, had it been woven better, and had the director, and I'm repeating myself here, that you could have made a really interesting film, and he could have been really good in it. And you just tighten him up a little bit. Just have somebody who knows what they're doing with the reins, and then you can, I mean, had that happened, maybe he wouldn't have got the Oscar, you know? Who knows? It would have been a better film, but less, oh, look at him, he's falling down. Oh, look at him, he can't shoot. Oh, it's so funny. It's not funny, mate. It's not funny.
But he can be funny. That's the thing. I think he's funnier in The Killers. He's funnier in The Killers. Yeah. He's funny. He's funny. Have you seen Point Blank recently?
Yeah, long time ago.
Yeah, he's funny in that. But you know, he's funny. There's a great sequence in that where, you know, the contrivance of the film in terms of its crime plot is he's been ripped off for a certain amount of money. I think $35,000, and he goes after that amount of money and no more. But in doing that, he absolutely destroys the infrastructure of a corporate crime syndicate. And there's a bit where he meets the top man, and the man asks him, like, "Why are you doing this? Why are you threatening this?" He goes, "I just want my money." And he goes, "No, really." And he just has this, and he goes, "No, I just want my money." And it's really funny and sinister and kind of slightly unknowable, like he is in his best roles, and in his best anti-heroes and in his best villains. There's just a real animal savagery there, you know. And the interesting comparison is something like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, because he kind of does, if you want to know, he does a lot of the same things he does. I mean, he's verging on going over the top. Of all his villains, it's the one that's the most over the top. And for a while it was like my least favorite till I watched it recently, and I think he's fantastic in it. And he almost wears exactly the same outfit, because there's a bit where he dresses in his old, in Cat Ballou, that is, he dresses in his old garb, doesn't he? He has it, you know, and he looks ridiculous. He's got this kind of Zorro style, like Hispanic gear, which he wears in Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I don't know if that was a reference, and he looks ridiculous. But he's not ridiculous in that. He's pretty much doing a lot of the same stuff physically, but he's playing it as an absolute savage, and it works. Do you think the film would have worked better just as a straight up Western rather than a comedy? Cat Ballou, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they'd adapted it sort of straight, because I've not read the book, I don't know, you know, how far it deviates from the actual novel, but
I think it could have worked as it is if you just had somebody who knew what they were doing controlling it. Literally, I think that. Well, yeah, well, because Blazing Saddles does it better, I suppose, right? It's more of it's a funnier comedy. I think it's great that Marvin did this film. I think it's great because it's an opportunity. Any actor who is doing a certain thing and is very, you know, buttoned up and tight and, you know, very sort of, as you say, very rigid performance. Not rigid, it's not the right word, but like very pent up
coiled
performances. Yeah. Is then allowed to kind of play when they've been doing this for a long time. Great, brilliant. Like you want to, as an actor, try different things. And sometimes you might succeed, sometimes you might not succeed. Well, there's me and you here saying that he didn't succeed, but then there's the Academy and then all the public who's saying how amazing he is, and the critics saying how brilliant he is. So, you know.
Well, no. A lot of critics didn't. A lot of the critics didn't like it. Pauline Kael, who I can't remember the quote, but I remember a quote that she said at one point, Lee Marvin never gave a bad performance in an action film. And she didn't like this, and I think she was a Marvin fan. She kind of railed against it. So it wasn't necessarily critically lauded, but the Academy liked it. And I think the Academy. I mean, I want to talk about the Academy in a minute, but one of the things I like about the movie was it established him as a star, and then he didn't make. I'm going to slightly contradict what I said a moment ago, but he didn't make more Cat Balloos. He goes on to make The Professionals, which is a great Western. It's not top tier, but I really like it, and he allows other people to steal the thunder from it. Yeah, but he's the kind of calm center in the middle of this bunch of mercenaries in Mexico, and Burt Lancaster steals the film from him. And then and that's a big commercial success. And then he has a monster hit with The Dirty Dozen. And again, he's stepping back and he's allowing Charles Bronson, Jim Brown, John Cassavetes again, Telly Savalas to do all the kind of the slightly more sort of eye-catching acting, but he's holding it all together. And he's brilliant. And then he takes this massive sort of risk with Point Blank, which is a very avant-garde crime film that incorporates a lot of, you know, sort of John Borman's debut in America, and he exercised his star power to give Borman complete artistic control of the film, and then delivers what I think it's not my favorite performance of his, because that's The Killers. I think it's probably his best performance and his best film in Point Blank, and he's ceding his star power to make this. And it's almost like more so than The Killers, it's like the anti Cat Ballou performance, because he's almost, you know, there's a case to be made that he's not even alive. He's a guy that comes back from being shot and goes on this kind of strange existential mission of revenge, which is literally just to get the money that's owed him. That's all he wants. And he's silent, he's golem-like. It's a very physical performance, and he's utterly unknowable as well. And then in the middle of that, he goes off and makes Paint Your Wagon, which I think the film's a commercial disaster, but he scores a #1 hit record with I Was Born Under a Wandering Star. And then that seems to galvanize him for more bad acting in the 70s. But he still comes back. He never deviates from sort of his magnetic north, which is these sort of
steely,
kind of, steely, enigmatic, slightly unknowable character. And a lot of his characters don't have names or don't have first names, you know. So you've got Walker in Point Blank, you know, in one of my favorite films of his, like The Emperor of the North, about have you seen that? No, it's sort of set in the Depression. It made a great double bill with Hard Times, you know, the Charles Bronson film. That's my favorite film. I'm going to try and mention every podcast. It's a Depression era story about a tramp, an apex hobo, riding the rails, and an apex guard played by Ernest Borgnine, whose mission is to kill him. You know, and he's just called A #1. And then his last great role, I think, was probably Sam Fuller's The Big Red One. He's simply called the Sergeant. So you see, he plays these kind of characters that are sort of almost like walking myths, you know, and conundrums, and you know, and then he, you know, sort of goes back and does a bit of gurning, and then, you know, but it didn't derail his career in the way that you could argue it spoilt the acting to an extent of Jack Nicholson And
Al
should we talk
Pacino.
about like tough guys getting Oscars for sort of taking the mick out of themselves?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So I think this establishes a pattern of people doing great acting in genres that aren't necessarily rewarded with awards, and then they get awards at some point in their career, normally later on in their career, for sending themselves up. And like exhibit A and B is John Wayne, who, I mean, people can argue the merits of him as an actor. I'm a defender of John Wayne as an actor. I think he does brilliant work in The Searchers, no Oscar nomination. And other John Ford films, and then gets his Oscar for like letting his belly hang out and just bull roaring with an eye patch in True Grit. And then you get Jack Palance. You could say for a while is neck and neck with Lee Marvin as one of the most intense actors of the 50s. In Shane, gets his Oscar nomination for Shane, but he's in Attack, he's in, Big Knife, and he's great in those movies. And then gets his Oscar for like sending himself up in City Slickers, things like that. And so it's this horrible trajectory where actors, who do excellent work in disrespected genres, get their Oscars for mugging later on in life and just sending them up.
It's breaking the mold, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah.
So when the public see an actor play a certain role and then suddenly they flip it and do something else, it's such a surprise to them that this actor who has been stereotyped or has been presented to them in such a way, that's the problem, isn't it? Oh, you only do this, you only do that. It's like, no, most people are just actors, mate. They're just, the work comes their way and they'll gravitate to what maybe they're better at. But that doesn't mean that they're not able to, like the actor is meant to be able to take on many different roles rather than just sort of play the same thing over and over again. And so I think it's a public perception situation where everybody gets like really excited about, somebody doing something different. And yeah, it's a bit sort of limited and limiting, and I don't really like it very much. I mean, I think it's great that actors can do different things, and I think it's great that Lee Marvin did this, and it's great that he got an Oscar for it. Fair play to him, mate. He's a brilliant actor, and like Scorsese didn't get any Academy awards until The Departed, right? But way deserved them for like many films that he'd done before. Maybe this was again the Academy sort of the Academy, actors who've won Academy Awards vote for the latest. So whatever category you're in, you vote for the person that's up this year, right? Yeah. So it's actors voting for Lee Marvin.
Yeah, and he was a very well liked actor as well. That factors in.
Yeah, I
really
think so.
Really popular. Yeah, people loved him. His peers loved him. And he was seen as a kind of good guy who like helped out younger actors, protected directors and all of that sort of stuff, and was a really entertaining drunk, with massive psychological problems. There was a subgenre I thought about. I meant to mention this earlier. There's a subgenre that I think this film belongs to, called "Isn't Alcoholism Fun?"
Kid, what a time for you to fall off the wagon. Look at your eyes.
What's wrong with my eyes?
Well, they're red. Bloodshot.
You ought to see them from my side.
We're counting on you, kid.
Yeah.
And I was watching. It's kind of unrelated, but it's not, because I was trying to test my thesis I was watching Arthur, the Dudley Moore film, yesterday, which I had a bit of a hard time with largely due to Dudley Moore's, again, Oscar nominated, but sort of outrageous performance that's almost comparable to what Lee Marvin does, and was almost rewarded with an Oscar. But I was thinking about John Gielgud, because John Gielgud won his Oscar for that. And basically, the perception of it was because he swears or he says some naughty words, So the novelty factor of having John Gielgud, who's been unrewarded, in one of the most distinguished definitely theatre careers, saying dick and shit in his posh accent won him an Oscar. But my thesis was destroyed when I watched the film. I thought, actually, he's really, really good. Probably deserved his Oscar. You know,
Nice.
he's like the only subtle, nuanced character in it. And he's just holding the film together and making you just really kind of really wish that he's back on screen more than he is. But yeah, I think it's about disrespect to genres as well. You know, I think you can do great work in a genre that just never gets rewarded, because crime films, Westerns, you know, barely get award nominations. Crime films, a little bit
Horror
more.
films.
Horror film, yeah. We talk about horror films, the amount of great performances that never get nominated, don't even get considered. Yeah, you know, A24 actresses, the most snubbed Oscar category like in the last few years.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, you know. So I think it's more about genre, and then I think it's about guilt as well. This doesn't quite apply to Lee Marvin because he was kind of midway through his career, but with Jack Palance, it's like, yeah, maybe should have given him one ages ago. Pretty good in this. You know, John Wayne, you know, should have, you know, he's been propping up the industry, you know, for decades. Probably should have given him one for the Searchers, but his character probably a bit too unpleasant, a bit too complicated. Let's give him one for like, and also the whole thing of like the contrast of someone like sending up their image. I think people like that, you know.
Yeah, breaking the mold again, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
People don't necessarily have the most furtive imaginations, I think, when it comes to watching actors, especially if they've been presented in a certain way. So yeah, when something like that happens, oh, look at him, he can do comedy.
Yeah,
you know,
or not. It's
yeah.
But,
and I think he can do comedy. I think he was. Yeah. I think he had really nice moments in the film. Yeah. But like I say, I just think it looks, it's not composed well. It's like you have to have a rhythm. You have to have comedy is a science, mate. You know, like there's a formula for it, and if you don't stick to any of that formula, then you've just got Cat Ballou, which is like, you know, half a sort of like nice-ish, interesting film about a woman who's turns into a cowgirl, I suppose, or turns into a criminal of some sort, and then, you know, this big clowny performance by Lee Marvin that is only really clowny because the script's shit. And
he's bad, you know, and he's just overindulged, you know, and so, you know, I don't think Kirk Douglas would have been any better. He'd have arguably been worse. Have you ever seen a film called The Villain or Cactus Jack?
Oh, maybe a long time ago.
Yeah, I saw it as a kid. And even
Douglas, isn't it?
Pardon?
Douglas, yeah.
It's Kirk Douglas and Margaret. And the reason it's interesting is it's almost like you know, if you know, and they're obviously Kirk Douglas is a lot older and Margaret's like older, but they were going to be Shalene and she was going to be Cat Ballou. So it's interesting to watch this very, very broad, awful Western that has a novelty value of a young Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. I watched about 20 minutes of it on YouTube. I had to stop watching it. You know, it's just, you know, so I think whoever you stuck in that role they were going to pick an actor that was just going to go for it and be awful. So it's kind of a bulletproof role in one way, but also, you know, I don't know, it was just the ingredients of the film probably dictated they were going to get an actor with a director that wasn't going to control them, and whoever did it was going to give a different kind of awful performance, but an awful performance. Can I just ask you about the song? Is that song, because it's been in my head?
I think it's brilliant.
The best thing in the film, the song, I think.
Sure.
Yeah,
and those two, the best thing in the film. You know, talk a bit about Stubby K.
Well, all I know about him is that he was I think he was the original Nicely. He's still probably more famous for being Nicely Johnson in you know, Guys and Dolls, and yeah, he's one of the original cast members that makes it into the movie, and he sings "Sit Down, You Rockin' the Boat," and that's all I know about him. You know, and you know, and he's great. He's great. Him and Nat King Cole are brilliant. They're fantastic together.
They play really well off each other, you know. And it is a testament to the writing of the song, the performance, and I think those bits are the best directed bits in the film.
Yeah,
and the bits work.
And I wonder if it'd been better if they'd have just made it a kind of top to bottom musical. yeah, you that would have made it a rougher watch for you, but
yeah, I you know what, I think it could have worked. I think you could have had this the story. Yes, it's going to be probably a the pedestrian type story of some sort if it's going to be in that. But you could have punctuated it like they did with these wonderful with the song that went all the way through with this performance by these two troubadours.
Yeah.
But if the rest of the film was like anything like that, then it would have been great. I think this film could have been a great film.
And I think, here's a thought that's just occurred to me, because I think Paint Your Wagon, I don't know if you might block this from your memory. You know, when we were at drama school, we had to sit through like the third year productions, didn't we? We had to go. There was a gun to your head. You had to go. And we sat through Paint Your Wagon. I don't know if you remember that. The third, you might have Skyped that. I don't like Paint Your Wagon. We could do that. I don't really like Lerner and Loewe musicals. I like musicals, but I find Lerner and Loewe musicals long and boring. I don't like Paint Your Wagon. I do have the soundtrack album to Paint Your Wagon, by the way, because Lee Marvin's on it. And if you just took all of the songs from Paint Your Wagon and dropped them into Cat Ballou, it would be a great musical. So if you had Lee Marvin singing "I Was Born Under a Wandering Star" in Cat Ballou,
it might have been better.
Someone else singing "I Talk to the Trees," you know, maybe the Native American character or any of the young lads, or even Jane Fonda herself singing "I Talk to the Trees" and things like that. You know, you would have a much better movie. I think we fixed it. In an alternative universe, we'd have made it.
Yeah, it's a mashup, right? Between if you mashed up Paint Your Wagon and Cat Ballou, you would have a perfect film.
Yeah. If you just took the songs, if you just destroyed everything in Cat Ballou, and just transposed the songs, and because they fit, I think they fit. You know, it doesn't really matter that they're out of context. I mean, there's a few very specific Gold Rush songs that probably won't make any sense in our new alternate version of Cat Ballou. There, we fixed Cat Ballou.
A couple of things that we haven't talked about that I think are worth mentioning are that it's a nice feminist piece for the time. Yeah. You know,
apart from the bits where, you know, like the young Alpha's trying to get in it.
Yeah. But she sort of finishes with her dignity intact. You know,
and gets away with murder.
She gets away with murder. It's
literally,
great.
That's quite subversive, actually. She gets away with murder, literally.
Yeah. And also the Native American Tom Nardini got a Golden Globe for it, playing, what was the name of the character? Jackson Two Bears. Apparently, they did a made-for-TV version of Cat Ballou in the early 70s that where he replayed the same part.
Who played Kid Shalene in that? Was it Jack Elam?
Possibly. Which we didn't even mention in the last Once Upon a Time in the West. I don't think we mentioned his name once.
No. Well, we mentioned him in passing. We can do that now. And the big bit of business that we forgot to mention was the fact that they got the fly to stay on his face in that famous opening scene by smearing honey on his beard.
Yeah.
So there we go. We've addressed that balance. Do we want to say anything more about Lee? We haven't even mentioned like what makes Lee Marvin such a good tough guy, which is essentially his World War II experiences.
Could you talk about what makes Lee Marvin such a good actor?
Well, a good tough guy, a good actor in sort of crime films and violent films. And my favorite generation of actors are all the sort of post-war American character actor come ugly movie stars, you know, most of whom served in World War II, you know, like the Jack Palances, the Neville Brands, the Lee Van Cleefs. Mitchum didn't, weirdly enough. He didn't serve in World War II, but he's of a similar vintage. He had a hard life. He was on your chain gang, a hobo, and all of that sort of stuff. And Lee Marvin is the kind of first among equals because he had the hardest World War II experience. He was a Marine in the battle to take the Japanese island. So he's involved in 21 amphibious landings, was wounded twice. He was shot in the backside, you know, which nearly killed him. He was invalided, I think, for a year, and then shot in the foot. He was a sniper. He saw the majority of his company killed around him, invariably killed people himself, and then spent the rest of his life kind of processing that. which took an enormous toll on him in terms of his kind of emotional life. He was a heavy drinker. To kind of compensate, he had survivor's guilt. He had PTSD before it was diagnosed. Wasn't diagnosed until the 60s, I think. But and John Borman, who directed him twice and was a very close friend of his, writes very eloquently and makes a beautiful documentary articulating how Marvin sort of channeled that violence and that understanding of violence into his movies. So if you watch something like The Big Sleep, not The Big Sleep, The Big Eat, he just it's something new, it's something raw. That scene where he famous scene that kind of established him as one of the great tough guy character actors, where he throws coffee in Gloria Graham's face, and it happens off camera, but it's the change, it's the look, it's the feral nature. And you know, when he's beaten with a horsewhip James Stewart, it's savage, and it doesn't feel like it belongs in that era. It believes like it comes from somewhere else, something like primal or nasty's invaded this period of movies and embodied this man. And that's one of the things I think that gave him that edge and that sort of slight superiority in sort of communicating violence. And you see it when he lets himself go and unleashes violence and the killers. Would you agree with any of that?
Yeah, 100%. I think he's a phenomenal actor, and I haven't seen as many films of his that I'd like. Like, did you say he was the sergeant in The Big Red One? Is that right?
Another movie I recommend. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Just to go on to that. Yeah. There's a lot of movies that I saw when I was younger that I haven't revisited, not because I didn't want to, just because I haven't got round to. So watching The Killers was great. I will definitely watch what was the Emperor's?
The Emperor of the North.
Emperor of the North.
And Prime Cut's a good one. That's just a weird one. He did sort of lean into some strange. That's him versus Gene Hackman. It's a real kind of, it's a contemporary 70s crime film where he's sort of, it's strange and it's nasty, and it just involves him going down south to Kansas to sort out Gene Hackman, and it involves kind of people being turned into sausage meat. This very, very strange action sequence in a county fair that involves him being chased across a field with a combine harvest, massive sort of combine harvester. So it's very bizarre action sequences, and he's great in it. And again, I think he's wearing his grey suit, which is almost like his armor. And it was Sissy Spacek's first film as well. So you get this, Lee Marvin going up against Gene Hackman, and then having this very, very sort of gentlemanly courtship, considering the age difference and how creepy it could have been. Because I think Sissy Spacek was probably just barely in her 20s. Between Marvin, who's probably in his 50s at that point, and Spacek, and it's a wonderful film. I think, and there's so many like that on his filmography. And then he'd just zag and do something that involved gurning, and then like his last film's Delta Force with Chuck Norris, and so there you go. It's a fascinating career. I'll show you how big a Lee Marvin fan I am. I brought this down. This is the M Squad soundtrack.
Wow, cool
album, and at the back there, I bought this in a record shop in New Orleans, and don't even have a record player at the moment.
Brilliant.
So it's a sort of treasured possession. But a friend of mine mocked me horribly about my Lee Marvin fandom. So this is a bit of a shout out to Simon Hammond, who I know is listening, an old friend of mine. Lee Marvin never wrote an autobiography. His wife, I think it was his second wife, and his sort of longest wife, and the wife that was with him when he died, Pamela Marvin, wrote a book about him that I was so looking forward to reading, about their marriage. And then in the opening chapter, she says, many people have documented Lee Marvin's filmography, so I'm not going to talk about any of that. And it's like, well, I've just paid 20 quid for this book in hardback. And then she just goes on to talk about their fishing trips, because he was a big marlin fisherman. And my mate, Lee Marvin. Yeah, and I was around my mate's mum's house. He's living with his mum at the time. I was around my mate's house, and he turned to his mum. He was really lovely. He was like a second mum to me. He turned to his mum and he goes, "Did you know that Adam's just bought a book about fishing?" And she went, "No." He goes, "Neither did he." And he just like, but what it does have in there, I think it does have a lovely forward, I think, by William Hurt, who was with. I always think that the actor's second to last movie should be their last movie. So he did Gorky Park, where he plays his like final villain, and William Hurt credits acting with Lee Marvin as one of the most instructive things that he ever did as an actor. He says, acting with this man taught me how to act, you know, and then there's and in it there is in the book there is actually Marvin's own account of his World War II, because he wrote it down, never published it. There's his own account of his World War II experiences, which he made light of in interviews, but absolutely messed him up, you know. But also, you know, it's a bit of a deal with the devil, a bit of the Faustian pact kind of provided the, you know, the kind of raw material for what a great actor he was. Yeah,
amazing.
So, and he's buried in Arlington Cemetery, Marine Cemetery. So he's kind of like, yeah. So there he is. So is that a good place to kind of
perfect place? Yeah.
Now,
sure.
now I've got a bone to pick with you. You were supposed to pick the and you somehow
avoided
graceful.
Well, this one I didn't enjoy. So like this one I definitely punched up at, or punched down at, really. But anyway,
punched up at Lee Marvin, which is a risk because he could fight, you know. And so we didn't discuss this, so we're going to do this sort of on air, maybe thrash out what the next film is. I bought a copy of Inception.
Yeah, all right, let's do it.
You're not, and also I don't know when these are going to come out. The film probably be come and gone by then, but certainly the time of recording, the release of Oppenheimer is imminent, which is getting phenomenal advance word, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. And I've never really had.
As am I, actually. As am I. Yeah. I mean, I haven't watched a Nolan film since Inception. I don't think. The Batman films came before that.
Well, they came around it. I think they were either side of it. I think I'd have to look that up. I think he made
no intention. Had no sort of desire to watch Interstellar, or what was it? What else did he do?
Tenet was the other one.
No, I can't watch.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't like Interstellar. Kind of like Tenet, but and also he did Dunkirk. That's the other one he did.
No, I didn't see that.
So can we do? I'm asking. Rather than talent. Can we do Inception? Yeah. As I spent 99p on the DVD.
Yeah, I'll give you 99p back if we don't have to do it.
I'm quite happy to.
We can do it.
Quite happy to submit that in the expenses bit of my tax return. And so we can do Inception, and then because we've got about a 3-week break, I think, before we record our next episode. Not that you listeners and viewers it has any bearing, because you're going to get them one a week until we just run out of patience or kill each other or something like that. Yeah. We'll have both seen Oppenheimer, presumably, so we can talk about that as well.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll have seen it. I'm going to go and see it.
Yeah, you'll definitely have seen it. I want to see it, but
IMAX.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. I would like to see that, but I don't know. Maybe when I come back to England, I can do that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the first thing you need to do, like while you're jet lagged, is to go and see Oppenheimer.
Get woken up by a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, which apparently hasn't been digitally done. He's done it.
Yeah, I did hear something about that.
By probably setting off an actual nuclear bomb. Yeah, knowing Christopher Nolan, like he's very analog, isn't he? So let's just make a nuclear bomb, set it off, irradiate the actors in the name of art.
Okay, can we do it again? We're doing it on film. We need to do it again. Please.
Yeah. Oh no, the film's all melted. So there we go.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah,
apocalyptic note.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I'm going to say goodbye from Nottingham, England.
I'm going to say goodbye from Sydney, Australia. Until the next time.
Goodbye.
Wait, I don't have the time.
The mission has been completed.
Groovy.
Thanks so much to everyone who has listened so far. You may have heard Adam say at some point in his presumption and arrogance that our episode would come out once a week, no matter what. No idea where he got that from. He was wrong, and if you've been listening to the pod, you'll know it's not the first time. He cannot be trusted. We're going to take a break for a few weeks, and we'll be back very soon to shred some more classics, Kruger style. Remember to like, subscribe, or give us a comment wherever you get your podcasts. You can even send us an email, punchingupmoviepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks once again for all your support, it means the world to us. Next up, Inception. See you soon.